Well, hello and welcome to the Car Care channel. How you guys doing today? I hope everybody's doing well. Before we get started, I want to say a few things. First, the email situation is getting resolved finally. So within the next week, I'll actually catch up. I just wanted to give an update. If anybody sent me an email, I'm trying to respond to new emails right away. And now I have a small backlog between March 1st and March 18th. So if you send me an email within that window, I am working on it, so you will get a response very soon. And another announcement I want to make is the series about engine control. I know some guys have asked me about it. Is it dead? Is it done? What's going on with it? Actually, it's not dead. And in this week, you're going to see 2 episodes. One of them is a very anticipated one, which is the catalytic converter, how to diagnose it properly. So look forward for that one. And I am hoping, and don't quote me on this one, after this week, that is starting tomorrow, we're going to have a truck week or maybe a couple of weeks. I am trying to work things out, but we're going to start with Tundra videos, Tacoma videos, and we're going to focus a lot more on fall runners. Actually, a whole series is planned for fall runners. I won't tell you more. You're going to have to wait and see what I have in store for you guys. Having said that, guys, let's get right ahead to the questions. And the first question is, Christian says, I wonder how to store a car during winter in the garage. Do I need to remove the battery, and how to protect the battery? I found my battery dead and beyond repair after 6 months storage. So I do have a video on how to store your car properly, if you would. But on the battery, the best thing you can do is, if it's winter storage outside where it's super cold, remove the battery from the car, leave it in a heated spot. Batteries should not freeze. However, they get really cold and when you're not using them, things kind of start falling down. So either have a battery maintainer if it's inside a garage that is heated, or if it's not a heated garage and it's going to consistently drop below freezing, I would remove that battery, store it in your house or somewhere safe, not inside your house, but somewhere where it doesn't go below freezing, and that should do it. In your garage, obviously, the better option is a battery maintainer. So, Jose, thank you, sir, for your super chat. Let's read your question. I have a Lexus IS 350 all-wheel drive 2016. I did an automatic transmission service at my car, 48,000 miles with OEM WS 4 quarts, came out, and it was darkened. Don't know it's supposed to go 100,000 miles. Which synthetic WS trans fluid would you recommend? So one thing, folks, about the WS fluid, even when you drain it at 60,000 miles, it will have a dark appearance to it. That is normal. I don't want you to be alarmed by that. However, if you kind of shine a light at the fluid, or as it's draining, kind of shine a light through it, you'll see that bright red color. That is normal for the WS fluid. It does get dark quick. Nothing to be concerned about. And the best fluid for your transmission is the one you're already using, the original WS fluid. Folks, transmissions are way too expensive, and gambling with aftermarket fluids, if you would. Yeah, some of them will be great and they will be fine, but do you want to be the test bed for that? You have 100% chance that the WS original fluid will work perfectly fine, but you have a 50-50 shot with any aftermarket. So I would really stick with the originals in this case. Okay. Let's see. So Gianni says, and I think this is a really good question, how can I prevent the windows from freezing shut in cold weather? Gianni from the Great White North. Well, I am not in the Great White North, but close. Chicago, this is a very common thing. It snows or you get moisture buildup and then all of a sudden it all freezes. And now that's the #1 reason why you rip your weather seals or you break the tab off the glass, and we see this all the time. And a new one, quick story, 18 Camry I just had in the shop a few weeks ago. Apparently they kept really trying to bring the window down until the whole regulator just bent. So that's not good. The best way to prevent them from freezing, and this is not a very common method, but listen to this. When you park your car, crack the window open just a hair. You don't even need the window to clear the weather seal. You just want it to not be all the way up. So have it just down enough where it's still inside the seal in case you get rain or water. That's going to protect it. But then when you want to unfreeze the window, you just raise it up, raise it down, and it'll immediately break the freeze and come down. Other ways that there are some products that you can spray on there. Honestly, I haven't seen one that works. It's just the reality of living in the great north, white north, but that's how it is. Moving on. Let's see. So Rick says, to your recent release on the 2GR coolant replacement, are there engine block drains to be concerned with? So Rick, the 2GR does have a block drain. It's actually right underneath the exhaust manifold on the back side on bank one. They're really hard to get to, and if you have an all-wheel drive one, they're really hard to get to. You have to get like a straight shot or go from the side, from the wheel well to get to them. And honestly, after you do all this mess and you see how much coolant drains out of the block, you'll be like, yep, this is not worth the hassle. I drain them at the shop. When you have the car in a lift, it's much easier. And I have this one socket, maybe I'll feature it in a video, that is a long swivel head. Snap-on makes it very expensive, not really worth it for DIY. But that one works really good, and you can just get a straight shot at it. But otherwise, the amount of coolant you're going to drain is really not worth it. And even when you drain the block, I will tell you this from experience, you drain the block, life's good, and I take the engine apart, and guess what? There's so much coolant left in that engine. It makes me wonder, why is there a block drain? That's just the way it is. So honestly, this little amount that's left, really not worth draining and going through all that hassle. So Marvin Walker says, is all-wheel drive not really worth to have? Because many say it's not because it's not really beneficial like four-wheel drive. So folks, let's talk briefly about all-wheel drive, four-wheel drive. Four-wheel drive is more for off-roading, if you would. It's more capable, it's more strong. You can really hammer it in going in a muddy road or climbing rocks. And usually four-wheel drive refers to cars that have a transfer case, that have a lot more reduction. You can have a low range, and they have real front and rear axles, something like a 4Runner, something like a Sequoia Line Cruiser, something of that nature. But all-wheel drive is more for snow driving, very light off-road, maybe driving down a dirt road that gets a little muddy with rain. All-wheel drive tends to be less mild. It's more mild, I'm sorry, form of a four-wheel drive, but it's really not as capable. Now, all-wheel drive definitely is great for snow, heavy rain, light mud, kind of driving on a dirt road. You'll feel the car much more stable. In snow, it's great. There's no other way to say it, because if you just want a normal SUV, you don't want to buy a body-on-frame, big gas-guzzling Sequoia, for example. You just go with an all-wheel drive car that is a normal SUV or a sedan, but it has all-wheel drive. It gives you a little bit better traction, more stability. And if you live in snow and you pair that with snow tires, now you have the ultimate snow driving machine. But remember, no matter how good your all-wheel drive system is, you still have to brake. So that doesn't work very well, regardless of the car and regardless of the tires. So just because you have all-wheel drive, don't go flying down the snow, because you won't be able to stop. Bobby G says, hi, AMD, thank you for all the great content. 2006 Matrix with only 60,000 miles. Shakes at low speed and radiator fans runs most of the time, even when the engine is cold. Any tips? So, Bobby, that Matrix has a few things. First one is clean the throttle body. That shaky idle, clean the throttle body first, then check your spark plugs. I've seen when the spark plugs are really bad and carboned up, they start shaking. But another common thing with them is motor mounts. There's 4 motor mounts. I've seen people try to jack them up and check, and it motor mounts in the end. If the throttle body is clean, spark plugs are good. Motor mounts, that's the next thing that is notorious with these. On the fan running most of the time, do you have your heater on or AC on? Sometimes if you, on these cars, if you put it on defrost, the AC will kick on, and that would explain why the fan is running all the time. So I would look at the AC compressor, see if that's running, turn off all your heater, your fan, put it to 0, see if that shuts it off. That's the only thing I can think of. Otherwise, you'd want to dig in diagnosis, see what's causing the fan. The fan circuit on these older Toyotas, they're really simple. They don't have much to them, but that's the route I would take. Patrick, thank you, sir, for your super chat. And I see that you have no question. I really appreciate you supporting the channel, sir. I appreciate it. If you have any questions, just let me know. So, continuing on. Peter Vaughn says, my 2018 Corolla has a mildew smell from the AC. Did a treatment with the AC vent and duct cleaner, spray, but the smell returned the next day. Should I remove the cabin filter when doing this? Any other tips? Yes. I'm actually planning a video on this as now we go into stinky AC season, if you would. That's the word I'm looking for. Few things. First, prevention is better than dealing with the problem when it's already there. The best way to prevent this is try to run your AC at fresh air as much as possible. And that's the first step. If this doesn't help it, after you fix the problem, of course, then try to 2-3 minutes before you get home, turn off the AC, leave the fan on. This dries the evaporator, and that's really what causes the smell. You have a wet evaporator in a dark area. It is like a vacation resort for mold and mildew to build up. That's just the way it is. But using recirculated air, you're going to have that stagnant air that just doesn't go anywhere, and that really doesn't help the case. As far as fixing it, you do need the cabin filter out and replaced in the end. A few things you can do. There's a kit that Toyota makes. It really works, and that's what I'm going to do the video on. It's a 2-part process. First, you have to clean the evaporator of the car off from the bottom. You spray it up, it foams up, then it washes everything down. And then you use a disinfectant, kind of a deodorizer type spray that comes with the kit. You spray that. Cabin filter has to be out. Otherwise, you're spraying all that right on top of the cabin filter, and it's not going anywhere after that. So you also want, after the service, and this is actually a TSB recommended by Toyota, you might want to consider a charcoal activated cabin air filter. It just helps a little bit better. And after that, immediately, you got to follow it up with the don't use recirculate all the time. Try to, as much as possible, let it go on fresh air. That really helps things out. So, no, Scott, thank you for your super chat, sir. When changing the transmission fluid for a 2ARFE 2.5 liter engine, what's the temp range does it have to be for the drain and perfect level? So I wouldn't have the temp range. I would need the year model of the car, because I didn't think you wrote it down. And that one I would have to look it up. Most of them are 95 to 103, 113, sorry. Some of them are 104. You'd have to send me the... leave it in a comment on this video when we're done with the live stream, or send me an email and I'll get back to you, because I'd have to look this one up. Every car is different. But as far as the perfect level, so a lot of people have asked about this, and honestly, the perfect level is a relative thing. Get it as close as possible to perfect level. But I've seen people where they're so concerned, they're starting to bring out their levels, and they're trying to level the car perfectly, and they're spending way too much time and effort on it. It needs to be close. You just don't want to have the car on an inclined driveway like this and you have it lifted. That's obviously not level. If you other way, same thing. But if your driveway or garage is relatively level, where you don't, if you pour some water, it just doesn't go flying one way, I think that's level enough, because honestly, the lifts that we use, they're also not perfectly level. They're relatively level. So eyeball it, use your best judgment. Just look at the car when it's lifted. If it looks straight to your eyes, I think that's good for me, because again, the transmission level, we're trying to set it as accurate as possible, but there is a small room of error that is engineered in it. So James says, thank you for your super chat, sir. How often would you change 2019 hybrid transmission and diff fluid when towing a small camper regularly? God bless you, sir. I appreciate it. Thank you for your super chat and watching my videos, James. So James, safely, you can do this every 60,000 miles or 100,000 kilometers or 6 years. Keep it at the lower range. I usually tell you for hybrids, 60,000 miles to 90,000 miles, that's the range. But if you're towing with it all the time or regularly, I would keep it closer to that 60,000 miles or 100,000 kilometers. You should really have no issues with that. And again, when you drain the fluid, it might be a little darker. That's okay. Don't be alarmed. WS fluid gets darker much quicker than others. So, no, Scott, Scion TC 2012. So I'd have to look that one up. I really appreciate your super chat. Please send me an email, thecarcarenut@gmail.com. And as soon as we're done with the live stream, I'll go check it and I'll respond to you. I just got to look it up. So Jose says, thank you for your super chat, sir. What should I look out for? A Lexus IS 350 all-wheel drive, maintenance-wise. Want to keep the car a long time, trouble-free, at least transmission and engine. So oil changes every 5,000 miles. I have dried my lungs saying this. 5,000 miles, 6 months. That is the most important thing. If you want to play it safe, go with that. Yeah, sure, you can go summer models. You can go 10,000 miles in 1 year, but there are so many conditions for that I'd be careful. And if you want to play it safe and you know you're going to keep this car for long and you're trying to take care of it from day one, I would do that and you wouldn't have an issue. Transmission fluid every 60,000 miles or 6 years, whichever comes first. Coolant, first replacement at 100,000 miles. Following replacements every 50,000 miles or 5 years, whichever comes first. And spark plugs are 120. Some models are changing over to 60,000. So you want to watch your owner's manual maintenance guide. And that should be that, really. You bought a Lexus because you want it to be a reliable car. So there's not going to be a lot of maintenance on these cars. And then obviously brakes, tires as needed. Any other repairs, drive belts, noises, issues, deal with them as they come, but don't expect too much. That's the one thing I will tell you. Okay. Let's see. So Fizz Out says, what can cause high fuel consumption? And plus 10 to 20 total fuel trims. Fuel trims varies inversely with RPM. Check PCV, purge valve, O2, cap, dipstick, clean mass servo, can't find vacuum leak. So this is a subject that you will see talked about in Wednesday's video. Fuel trim. People always read into the fuel trim too much. Fuel trim, the minute you get off the idle, it's irrelevant to diagnosis because the computer is making micro adjustments. Not even the scan tool is fast enough to see how many micro adjustments it is making. But when you're at idle, you're able to see where it settles. And usually when you start going over 20% is when I have a concern. But when you're at 5, 7, 8, 12 even when you get to the tens, as long as it's steady and your short fuel trim, and I don't want to spend too much time explaining it because this is a long subject, but as long as your short fuel trim is not continuously rising and it's stabilizing, it's good. There are many factors that play in fuel trim for it to be, everybody looks for that perfect zero. It'll never be zero. And sometimes it will be, but it doesn't mean there's a problem if it's not. Remember, altitude, fuel quality, engine wear, all kinds of stuff come in it. And that doesn't mean we have to chase after problems that are not there. However, you have a concern. I say this because a lot of people will just chase after it for nothing. But you have a concern. Your fuel mileage is down. I see here 2009 Venza V6 all-wheel drive. Now, the Venza did not exactly get the best gas mileage in the world, but 13 miles per gallon, I think you can get better than that. A few things that I would look into, and people often miss them, very commonly miss them. Brakes. Are your brakes locked up and dragging all the time? Did you just replace your tires? Are your tires underinflated? Overinflated wouldn't be a problem, but underinflated. Are your tires, did you buy heavy tires or tires designed for wear? Like one example that we always see is Michelin Defender. Awesome tire, but horrible for fuel economy. So there are many things that you want to look at. Other things is if your fuel trim is actively going at idle over 20, when you're just, the car is just at operating temperature and it's idling and it just creeps up over 20, the long or the short, we might have a problem. And this will not be something that's very simple to find, because when it creeps up just over 20 and then comes back down, you have a very small vacuum leak. Now, on that Venza, there's nothing common that I would just tell you, oh yeah, it's this problem. But look at intake manifold gasket, look at cracks on the intake. Has there been any work? That's how I want you to start your investigative work when diagnosing a problem. First question is, we're working on a Toyota, so a large percentage of problems with Toyotas is human induced, if you would, mechanic induced sometimes. So you want to look at common recent work. If there's no recent work, then look at the weak spots, gaskets, hoses, vacuum hoses. Sometimes they're harder to find, and some people will use a smoke machine to find them. Some people will just spray carb cleaner or brake. Don't use brake cleaner, but use carb cleaner or throttle body cleaner. Just spray it on the vacuum hoses very lightly and see if your idle jumps up. Or better yet, if your fuel trims go crazy when you do that, that's when you start finding vacuum leaks. I would start with that, but it's a long process to chase after car is running fine with no check engine light and gas mileage dips. There could be a lot of things involved here. So another question, M. Omari says, I was wondering what your opinion is on the Lexus GS350 versus the Lexus ES350 models. Which one of the two would you choose? Now, personally, I would go with the ES350. I have no problem with the GS350. It's a great car, but they're a lot harder to work on than the ES350. And I just don't personally, that's again personal opinion, I don't like how the GS350s drive. I think they're too much car, but kind of underperforms, while the ES350 is a lot smoother. It's more refined, if you would, for the price point. I think the ES350 is a better choice. Reliability-wise, they're close, but even if it's a Lexus or a Toyota, it's a machine. One day you're going to have a problem with it, and the GS350 will be a lot more expensive to fix than your ES350, which is essentially an Avalon dressed in a nicer suit. That's one way to put it. The GS350 is not. It's its own platform. So let's see the next question. So I will be buying a 2021 RAV4 Prime. I rent an apartment, so I will not be able to use an at-home charger. If I use gasoline 98% of the time, will the RAV4 be okay? Will that affect scheduled service? It will not. You will be okay. One thing I will tell you about the Primes, when you are, let's say you charged it and now you're using the EV range, when the EV range is depleted completely, it turns into a RAV4 hybrid, 100%. There is nothing different. It'll drive exactly the same. Gasoline engine will come on, charge the battery a little bit, shut off, come on, just like a regular hybrid. But my problem is with that, you are spending a small fortune to buy the RAV4 Prime over the RAV4 hybrid. The problem is, if you're not going to be charging it and utilizing that range where you are filling up once a month, once every 2 months, then why are you buying a Prime is my question, because the price difference between the Prime and the regular RAV4 hybrid is significant. And other than the primeness of the Prime, which is really the EV range, there's nothing else, they're exactly the same car. Same look, same interior, same ride, same wind noise, same shaken mirror, same car exactly. So I wouldn't, in this case, if 98% of your driving will be without charging the EV range, I would look at just the regular RAV4 hybrid and maybe take that money, take your family in a beautiful vacation, or drive with the car and not have to worry about it. So another question, 2018 Camry. What does it take to reset the transmission adaptations? Is it tech stream only? So to reset the transmission memory on Toyota vehicles that are newer, and I don't want to put a year on newer, around 2010 and up, you do need a scan tool. Now, TechStream, of course, can do everything, but other scan tools, you would need a professional grade two-way communication scan tool to be able to reset something like the memory. I can't recommend a brand. I have four tech streams. I don't really use aftermarket scan tools with Toyotas, so I can't tell you exactly what brand works great and where to go and what to do, but TechStream works great. Of course, TechStream can do everything. There is no aftermarket scan tool that can do more than TechStream because that's the official tool for Toyota. So another question is, Bert, I own a 2019 RAV4, original owner, Japan built, 2,100 miles. I have a strong coolant smell after long drives from this new 2.5 motor. Is the odor from the overflow tank, and is it normal? Well, coolant smell is not normal, usually. However, is there any leaks? Is the overflow bottle overflowing? Maybe it was overfilled. One thing about the overflow bottle, which unfortunately I miss saying in my coolant videos, the overflow bottle has a maximum and a minimum. When the car is cold, you should, just like the engine oil, you want it to be halfway. People have a tendency of, and even dealerships, not people, dealerships, professionals, have a tendency of filling that thing to full when the car is cold. Oh, because I don't want to send the car out with the coolant low. Well, you just overfilled it. And now when the coolant heats up and expands, now we have a coolant spill all over the place. Or usually you see that big crusting over the coolant bottle, and that's not good. And that's could be your coolant smell. But if that's not the case, and that bottle is not overflowing, there has been some reports of that. Nothing I can add to it. I have not seen it personally, but I've seen it on the radar. I would bring it to your dealership's attention, have them make sure there's no leaks, pressurize the system, and go from there. Go from there. Okay. So Victor says, I have a 2014 Toyota Camry with 75K. Can I change the transmission fluid for the first time with this mileage without ruining it? Should I change the filter too? So I think at that mileage and that age, you're okay. I would go ahead and do it. I wouldn't wait longer. Try to do it as soon as possible. Try to do a drain and fill. I just don't like when you go over the miles and years. I don't like a flush because it might be much. I would just do a drain and fill, call it a day, and do not worry about the filter. One thing about the filter is, folks, this is one of the #1 asked questions. Should I replace the transmission filter? And please allow me the opportunity to address this. Toyota filters. I have never seen a single, and I've been inside so many Toyota transmissions, it's not funny. There is not a single filter that I've seen that was obviously clogged, dirty, damaged in any way, shape, or form. So as long as you replace the transmission fluid on time, you will have no issues. The only recorded incident of a filter being completely clogged was on a, if I remember correctly, a 2012 Camry that had well over 200,000 miles. And the thing has original fluid that was completely sludged up. This was a city car that was driven hard, not taken care of. And the thing was just completely sludged. And there was no transmission. It was towed in for no drive. So that is not the filter's fault. There is no maintenance and abuse. So I wouldn't worry about the filter. And the problem is, every time you open that oil pan, you're exposing transmission to contaminants. And if you're really not careful with your handling of the new filter, installing everything, cleaning the pan, and all this mess, you really could cause more harm than good. And I wouldn't bother. I wouldn't waste my time on changing a transmission fluid filter on a Toyota transmission. Maybe other brands, I don't know, but Toyota, Lexus, I wouldn't worry about it. But I would worry about changing that lifetime fluid, which is not lifetime. Let's see here. Bartos says, I watched your video on RCD unavailable. I did the left to right, steering wheel lock to lock numerous times, but to no avail. What else can I do? So my question to you is, are you doing this with the car in reverse? That's the other one that is missed. You want your car in reverse, turn the wheel left to right, multiple times. Sometimes it takes a couple times to do it, but you got to be in reverse with the camera showing. Now, if that doesn't work, then we might have issues. The first thing is check for codes. There might be issues, not really because the RCD really is not a system. There's no components, it's software. But if there's a communication problem between the ABS and the safety system, you're going to have a problem. So that would unfortunately require some diagnosis. You need to pull codes, check signals between them, and go from there. So Icon says, is the 2020 Tundra GDI, does it need a catch can? The 2020 Tundra has a ancient 350, 5.7, 350 cubic inch. It has an ancient engine. I mean, the thing is ancient. There is not even, direct injection is not even on the radar. We're still surprised by variable valve time, dual variable valve timing on a V8. So no, it does not have direct injection, and it doesn't need a catch can. It wouldn't hurt, but really there's no problems with these with oil and intake. This one does not have an oil separator. This thing is ancient. The V8 and the Tundra is ancient, and that's probably have a lot to do with why they're so reliable, because the thing's been the same since 2007. Some lights, some different seats, and that's about it. Not much have changed with the Tundra. When you lift it up, it's like, I can't tell if this is a 2007 or a 2021, other than the rust in my area. So Anita says, do hybrid miles or EV miles put more or less wear on the car battery? For example, if you drive 80K miles in EV and only 20,000 miles in hybrid, would your car have less wear than driving 100,000 miles in hybrid? So I'm assuming you are referring to a prime or a plug-in hybrid. And I'm assuming you're talking about a Toyota plug-in hybrid, which is the primes. So one thing about cars are designed to be driven. Engineers, when they design cars, they're not going to put a lot of emphasis on, how is the car going to behave when it's not driven? So they usually put their engineering towards, when the car is driven, how is it going to last long? How is it going to perform well? And all this good stuff. But in the case where you're driving an EV range and that engine is just sitting there, well, that's equivalent to you not driving that engine. Engines, when they sit, and some people will purposefully do everything in their power in primes to not have the engine run. They will freeze in the winter, and I have seen this even on YouTube. They will decide to freeze in the winter just to not turn the heater on so the engine wouldn't kick on in really cold weather. I don't know what's the deal there, because in my book, if you drive an EV and it takes you a month or two to fill up with gas, that's pretty impressive. You don't need to wait a whole year to set some record on the forum that you drove a year without the same tank of gas. But the wear starts when you really don't let the engine run. It's like, essentially it turns into short trips, even though you're not doing short trips, but because most of your driving is EV. Let's say your commute is 40 miles, you drove 30 miles, 35, 37 miles on EV range, and now the engine kicked on the last 3 miles. Well, guess what? You only let this engine run for 3 miles. So that's short trips. So your maintenance need to be adjusted accordingly. My recommendation is every few weeks, don't charge the car, let the car run as a hybrid only. That gets the engine running, that gets everything moving. You don't have to worry about it. But if you're going to focus on your EV mode, I would make sure you pay close attention to the engine maintenance. You need to let that engine run every once in a while. So yes, it does put abnormal wear in a different way on the gasoline engine when it just doesn't run. I mean, I'll give you one example of the problems. I haven't seen this, but it's very, very possible and very likely. The piston rings just seize up. You have all this high moisture in the engine that doesn't run, doesn't heat up, and the piston rings just get a rust spot on the cylinder. I'm not going to scare people and say that I've seen this, but I have. So be careful on this one. So Jose says, what is a good temperature for your transmission? My IS350 hits 212 when it's driven spirited. Should I be concerned? My RAV4 V607 is about 190. So transmissions, and this question has come up, Jose, a lot. Your transmission is somewhat the same temperature as your coolant. And actually, in some modern Toyotas, you're going to have a coolant, like a little heat exchanger, and it's actually a fluid warmer and cooler at the same time. So your coolant temp, by the way, many people don't realize this, your coolant temp can go as high as 215 in really hot days, in really stop and go traffic with AC blasting, full blast. It just goes up. That's normal. But when you start getting into the 220, 225, 230, that's when things start kind of getting outside of the normal range, but you're driving spiritedly, you're hitting 212, that's normal. But the thing is, and this is how you want to judge your cooling system, as soon as you stop driving spiritedly and now you're driving normally, that temperature, we wanted to see it come back down. 190 is about the average. Actually, most Toyotas you drive on the highway in mild weather, you're going to see as low as 182, 179 even. That's normal for them. But stop in traffic, they'll immediately rise to 210. That's just the way they are, and I'm not concerned about it as long as they're able to come back. Now, you go to 210 and all of a sudden it starts climbing from there, we might have a problem. All right. Let's get back here. Where were we? So every once in a while, the screen just jumps, and I have to find where was the last question, guys. This is interesting. So Emilio says, hi, Emilio. I hope you're doing well, sir. I have a 2006 Toyota Sienna Limited. The transmission fluid looks okay, not dark or black. It has 115,000 miles. I'm assuming miles. Would a drain and fill be okay to do? Honestly, that one is a little bit for the older car. If the fluid looks clean, not dark or black, and it looks clean, doesn't have a burnt smell to it, I would do a single drain and fill and call it a day. No flushes. Don't do flushes in old transmissions that have a lot of miles. I just don't have a good feeling about them. Yeah, and I think you should be good, because especially if the fluid is clean. So Joseph, thank you so much, sir, for your super chat. I really appreciate it, sir. So Tony says, could you tell me which Lexus or Toyota model have the most comfortable seats for someone with a bad back? This one is very simple. 2005 actually to 2012 Avalon. I mean, the thing is awesome. It drives like a boat, and it is as comfortable as a boat. It is essentially a reliable Cadillac from years back when they used to put a couch and design a car around it. Of course, there are other models that are really comfortable. Your Toyota in like the range of 2012 to 2018, they did have some they got in their head that they should make sporty cars. There are, we're trying to compete with all these manufacturers. They started putting some pretty uncomfortable seats in their cars. Not all models, but they started getting heavy bolstering. I have a bad back too. That's the normal thing with mechanics. They're just not comfortable. Avoid the sport models of cars because they'll have the worst seats. But if you really want that comfortable seat, another one that has a surprisingly comfortable seat is a Prius V. I always find that seat one of the most comfortable it's a small, I know it might not be considered a small car, but it is essentially a Prius, but it has a very comfortable seat. There are many models. Be careful. Some of the Lexuses, especially when you get into the IS and the GS, they're not great. Of course, the LS is very comfortable, but again, it's an LS, it better be. The ES is usually very comfortable. Avalons in general are going to be your most comfortable ones. Camrys, 2012 to 2017, the seats can be a little odd, but 2018, they got a lot better, in my opinion. They got rid of the bucket seats for your normal car. I don't know why we need bucket seats in a Camry, but those are. But one standout is going to be that 2005, 2012 Avalon. I mean, they have the best. I've owned one, and I forgot I had back problems, but they're a little floaty on the highway. If that bothers you, that bothered me a lot, but that's the only complaint about that car. So, Jen Ogan says, what's the situation with the 2021 Sienna? Enough power to drive loaded minivan? Actually trying to get a minivan, and by the way, guys, you might not have noticed, I was on vacation last week, just hanging out with the family. You might have noticed I don't respond to comments right away. Just leave them all, bunch them up all the end of the day. Try to catch up some emails. Just took a week off to rest and just kind of catch up, spend some time with the family. Didn't go anywhere. COVID can't really go anywhere comfortably, but I want to get a Sienna and basically take the family on a road trip around the town. Just fill it up with, I don't know, bicycles and everything, kind of simulate a typical American road trip and just really push it to the limits. Because I have driven it, just me and two people sitting in the car. It feels fine. It's not, the Sienna was never really intended to be a fast car, although it was with the V6, but it's not intended to be that. So if the power level of the 2021 is acceptable, I think that's good. I noticed that it's not as peppy as the V6, of course, but I think the word I would use for it is adequate. But I cannot give you an answer for loaded with passengers and luggage until I've actually tested it, because I do want to test that. That will be coming up in a review that I will do on it. So John says, I have a 2013 Camry V6. What causes the engine to sound like a diesel, and is this normal? Yes, the 2GR. So even the 2AR, by the way, in case you don't know this, the 3.5 liter V6 and the 4-cylinder 2.5, the 2AR, let's say example 2012, 2017 Camry 4-cylinder, they're identical engines construction-wise, and I wish I can get a couple engines here, tear them apart, and show you. They're exactly the same on the way the valve train is built up. They're identical, and that's how Toyota saves on their parts, because they're same parts. But the 2GR is very loud. That's one complaint about it. Otherwise, it's a phenomenal engine, very reliable, very hard to work on, but very reliable nonetheless. But that diesel noise. So there's two noises that annoy people a lot with the 2GRs, with the 3.5 liter V6. First one is when you start them cold, they literally have piston slap noise. That's just the way they are, and there are countless people that complain about this, and this is horrible. And there are some YouTube personalities that recently compared an old 4Runner with a new 4Runner. Thank you, Grandpa Kilmer, for that. But that is not a fair comparison, because older engines had a timing belt and things were nice and quiet, but they also made 90 horsepower, 95 on a good day. The newer engines with variable valve timing, all this technology, they make so much power. That is the only sacrifice. Well, but you don't have a timing belt to replace every 90,000 miles, and you have all this stuff maintenance-wise that you don't have. But the noise is the only sacrifice that you have. And the 2GR, when it's warmed up, they're how would the word be? Just, they have a lot of racket. That's how they are, and that's why the 2GR has that big engine cover that you take that thing off, it's going to get even worse, because that engine cover is really heavily insulated to keep some of that racket from the hydraulic lifters and all the valve train that makes the noise, really, not anything else in the 2GR. But it is completely normal. Trust me, when you hear a 2GR that is bad, that has a bad VVTi gear and it's rattling, it's about to blow up, basically, you're going to know that that's not like a diesel. That's like a diesel that's going to explode. So, but it is normal for those to sound loud, especially in the 4Runners. That's one that people complain about. So, Wiley says, are TRD supercharged 4.0 V6 hard on fuel pumps? So I don't think I have seen a lot of fuel pumps on TRD supercharged ones. They do get a software update, and they, if I'm not mistaken, this has been a while since I've done one, it goes to premium fuel. So the fuel pump is very capable on these things. I mean, again, you're installing a TRD kit. They thought of this stuff. They looked at the volume that they needed for they looked at the volume that they needed to make this extra air that's coming in so they can match it with fuel. So if they would have seen that we're stretching the limit of the fuel pump, they would have added a fuel pump. I mean, the kit for the TRD supercharger is not cheap. So what's a few $100 more, I guess, to throw a fuel pump? But I have not seen any failures. I've seen them come in the shop, and they usually run okay. They don't have really premature wear or problems, but I have not really seen problems with fuel pumps. So moving on. So another question here, 2018 RAV4 hybrid at highway speed 75, 80 miles an hour, let off the gas pedal, the EV light comes on, and then there's a strong vibration like I ran over something. What's happening? So this one is harder to diagnose in this format, but let's talk about it a little bit. When you lift off your foot off the gas, here's what happens in a hybrid typically. Your EV light comes on, that means your engine shut off. And now the force of the road is turning MG2, which is one of the motors in the transmission, and now that is charging your hybrid battery. You press the brake, that intensity gets stronger, and that's regenerative braking. But the strong vibration is interesting because there's no drive shaft where things are loose. That there's that prop shaft between the front and the back in an all-wheel drive situation. There's no that. And honestly, this one is an interesting one because a strong vibration, does it, I guess when you say vibration, that's a relative term. Does it feel like the car just kind of comes down and slows down its own and you hear that loud noise that could be resonating as a vibration? That's the only thing I can think of. But as far as EV light coming on, that's normal, and that's a good sign. That means the engine shut off, and now it's slightly charging the hybrid battery. So Teddy Park says, I have a Dodge Prius 3. The owner's manual says to change spark plugs at 54K miles. What accounts for the difference in maintenance requirements between the USA and the Netherlands? Very good question. Emissions. Again, we go back to the same thing. And local regulations. Every country will have different regulations and different emission standards. So when the manufacturer is testing these cars, they're going to decide when do these certain components need to be replaced for the car to continue to be emission compliant. That honestly is the only reason, because if you dig deeper, I'll give you an example within the US that I know, and it's very interesting how they word that in the maintenance guide. So 2016 Highlander had a 2GR FE, non-direct injection, beautiful 6-speed transmission. That one has 120,000 miles spark plugs. 1 year newer, 2017, which has a 2GR FKS, D4S direct injection, and all the festivities with the 8-speed transmission, that has a 60,000 mile spark plug. And if you read in the maintenance guide, it'll specifically say spark plug replacement required so the vehicle would, don't quote my words, so this is not word for word, but it'll say to satisfy the emissions warranty. So can we go 120 and not worry about the warranty? I wouldn't take that route, but usually it's emissions and specific requirements with every country's like emission laws that require this. That's why there are differences between countries. Same story with the 0W16. That's another one that is interesting, why some countries don't require it and some do. So Republic says, wanting to buy a 2021 Sienna, and I am concerned about the engine that uses 0W16 oil. Does the dealer provide a loaner when the Sienna is in the shop? So I am not concerned about 0W16. Toyota is, if this was another manufacturer, yes, I would be concerned because you are the testing. I don't want to say the word I want to say, but you are the testing bed. We'll just throw it out there and hope for the best. We'll find out what happens. But Toyota doesn't function like that. That's why they took their time. They tested things. And that's why you see Toyota always late with their technology, because they really don't want to just, let's throw it out there and hope for the best. I'm not worried about the 0W16, especially for that engine. They didn't just take an old engine and decide, oh, let's throw 0W16 at it and hope for the best. They've done that before, but they designed an engine from the ground up and then decided to put 0W16 in it. That means they thought about what are the effects, what changes do we need to make before we throw that 0W16 at it and hope for the best. So I'm not concerned about that. But your question of does the dealer provide a loaner when the Sienna is in the shop, that depends on the dealership. Remember, dealerships are independent contractors. They're not really Toyota itself. They're just independent. So each dealership will have their own policies on that. Maybe shop around. If this is something that's important, when you go as a customer, if you're just there for maintenance, that's going to take half an hour. Obviously, they're not going to give you a loaner because it's just half an hour. But if you're going to be there for 2, 3, 4 hours, yeah, I think you are within your right to ask for a loaner, but that is at the discretion of the dealerships. Some dealerships will flat not have loaners. It's like, here's the door, have a nice day, call an Uber, we can drive you 2 miles to the store, and that's about it. Some dealerships will be, here's the keys to a brand new car, have a nice day, we'll call you when it's done. And some dealerships will actually rent you a car and you have to pay for it. Or if it's a warranty situation, they might provide some accommodations for you, but that really depends on the dealership. So Thomas Garcia says, what do you think of the 2008-2012 Toyota Tundra and Sequoias? Do they have rusting frame problems? That's the only thing they have. They're really good trucks. Honest to God, they're really good trucks. They're ancient. They're horrible on gas mileage. And they are a small nightmare when they break because they're very difficult to work on. But the key word here, when they break. They really don't break a lot. And most of their problems are oil leaks, small stuff that doesn't stop the car from running. But the frame rusting problems are pretty bad. Things get really bad with these. And if you live in the Rust Belt, or you're buying one from the Rust Belt and you don't live in the Rust Belt, that's a problem. You buy these new and you take care of them. You wash them regularly. And not just wash the outside, wash the frame underneath them. Undercoat them. Then you have one of the best trucks ever made, a total hidden gem. But buy one that is rusty and already rotten, it's a disaster waiting to happen. That's the only serious problem these things have. If you live in Arizona and California, I envy you because you have the chance to drive these things till the wheels fall off. And I wouldn't hold my breath in the wheels falling off because it's going to be a while. So Bill says, 2011 Highlander V6. I just saw your video on how to properly bleed it. Last year, I did it the old-fashioned way. So far, I've had no overheating issue. I guess I just got lucky. Yes. So one thing about the bleeding, and this is, Bill, I just want you to hear this out. So sometimes, yes, you do get lucky and life is good. However, I've seen them where everything is okay until you go turn on the heat. So what I would do, I don't know which state you live in and what kind of weather you have. If it's still a colder day, start the car, let it warm up. As soon as the gauge reaches its normal resting space, don't move the car, just let it idle. Turn on the heat and make it to go to your face, which is usually not a configuration you want to have, but heat on full blast, full fan, make it to go to face, and then put your hand. You really want to get super warm air when it's fully warmed up. If it's somewhat warm, but not exactly warm, give it a little bit more time to heat up. If it doesn't change from that, and then you rev it up to like 2,000 RPM, and all of a sudden it gets super hot, you have air in the heater core, and I would try this procedure. But if you have perfect heat, then I wouldn't even worry about it. You're good. I guess you did get lucky because these things can be really a pain to bleed sometimes. without doing that procedure. So let's see the next question. So another question is it advisable to buy a rust infested, that is a very good term, I like that term, a rust infected 2012 Camry from Canada, though already in Nigeria? No problem with the engine, the rust is noticeable on the floor. Honestly, if I lived in Nigeria and I enjoy that beautiful weather with I've been to Africa and I know how the weather is, that beautiful weather with 0 winters, I would not buy a car with rust on it from Canada or from Chicago or from this area, from the Great White North. If it was the last car in the world, honestly, because the problems will just never end. And the biggest problem is when you take it to a mechanic like me in Nigeria, they're going to just look at this car and look at you, go like, what is this? They're not equipped to work, and they don't have the experience working with these rust buckets. That's the term we use here in Chicagoland, a rust bucket. They don't have the experience to deal with these. Everything that you touch breaks. It's like, okay, what are we doing here? So it really doesn't make financial sense. If you already have this car, I would move to fix that rust, because that's your only choice here, because however you fix it, it's not going to return after 6 months or 1 winter or 2. You'll have a better chance of keeping it rust-free, relatively rust-free, but that's, if you haven't bought it, I wouldn't buy one. It's not worth it. So Beat Props says, thank you, sir, for your super chat. 2019 RAV4 hybrid, at what mileage year would you change the coolant? Thank you for the awesome channels. Thank you, sir, for your super chat. And I'm looking at the SEK. Is that Swedish krone, I think? Just wondering. So 2019 RAV4 hybrid, at what mileage year would you change the coolant? So the coolant, I'm going to say this in miles, and I'll try to remember the kilometers. I'm thinking you are from Sweden, and you guys are in kilometers. So the coolant, the first replacement, is at 100,000 miles or 5 years. So the 100,000 miles is going to be 160,000 kilometers. The subsequent replacement, which is like the second replacement, and I'll talk about that, why is there a difference in a second. The second replacement is every 50,000 miles. That's, I think, just under 100,000 kilometers, and every 5 years. And the reason there is a difference, and when we asked Toyota, hey, why is the first replacement longer than the second? The official answer was, well, in the factory, we have a more clean and controlled environment to fill the coolant, so there's not as much contamination. And when we fill it at the dealership, we are just a bunch of grease monkeys that can't keep things clean, so there's more contamination. I don't know how I feel about that one, but that one's up to you. But yeah, the first replacement, we haven't really seen issues when you go that 100,000 miles or 160,000 kilometers. So I would follow that, but keep it under 5 years, though. Some of these will say 10 years. I wouldn't go the 10 years, kind of like the lifetime transmission fluid. So Armando says, good afternoon. Good afternoon to you too, sir. I have a 2015 Corolla S with 64,000 miles. Is it okay to wait 6 months to get my transmission fluid drained and replaced? So this is a good question. When I say 60,000 miles to replace transmission fluid, it is an estimated good time. You go over it a little bit, you do it a little bit earlier. There is not an issue, but as long as we have a set plan that, I'm waiting for my tax return, I'm waiting from whatever, everybody has their financial life situation. It can't be just dumping money in the car whenever it needs it. So yes, I think it is not an issue to wait 6 months, even though you're 4,000 miles over the 60. Maybe by that time you'll be closer to 70, but that's okay. As long as you have it planned that, I am getting to that maintenance item. I've not neglected it or forgot it. I'm just trying to arrange my financials or whatever situation you are dealing with that requires you to wait that 6 months. So you're absolutely good, sir. Don't worry about it. So Anita says, I have a 2012 Prius that has a rattle in the lower driver's side area. It happens only when I go over bumps, especially at low speeds, and doesn't happen when turning. Any ideas how to fix it? So Anita, the first thing I would do with any rattle is distinguish, do I have a rattle inside the car or is the rattle outside the car? If you have a rattle inside the car, there is a very high chance that it is actually a panel rattling, like lower dash panels. There's a lot of plastic in that Prius. The plastic can be a little bit on the cheaper side, so they do tend to rattle. However, if your rattle is outside, then the first place I would look at for a lower driver's side area is struts, suspension. Nothing that is common that I will tell you, oh yeah, that's a super common problem. But this one will take a little bit of investigating. One thing I will mention about this that could be the issue: the electric power steering on these cars. There's a big motor mounted to the steering inside the car that assists when you turn the wheels. They do have a tendency sometimes, not as common, but common enough where I'll mention this, to get loose. And when you go over bumps, you'll hear that thing rattle because it's loose. But when you turn the wheel, the motor is torqued, so it pushes, and now it's no longer rattling. That's the one thing I would look at. And usually those will rattle very loud, and you feel it in the steering wheel. As you're like going over the bump, you feel like a vibration in the steering wheel, and that's how you know these things are loose. That is probably the last thing I would look at. But the first thing is, try to reach under the dash, like where you hear the noise, being careful, of course, and try to kind of hold panels, see if the rattling stops. If you feel it, if you're sure that this noise is inside the car, that would be a good way. Otherwise, I'd start looking at outside. Struts, another one is the cowl. Is there anything loose under the hood? Like, has the car been in an accident? Are there any panels that are rattling around? Don't always go for the big stuff first. Check the big stuff while you're there, but start with the smaller stuff. I always see people have an issue with diagnosis, and they always assume the worst and go after the worst. Always start with the small stuff first. So, Fruit Punch says, what do you think of the 2013 Venza? It's actually a very good car, not the four-cylinder. I don't like the four-cylinder in these. I have done so many engine rebuilds and actually block replacements from 2009, 2015, not so much the 15, but they're still a little newer. But let's say 2009 to 2013-ish, four-cylinder, block, oil burning. You would not believe how much oil these things burn. You replace the block again and again. And I just don't like the four-cylinder. I don't even think it drives well. I would go with the V6. If you're considering to buy one, I would go with the V6. Otherwise, they're really good cars. They have a few Achilles heels here and there, but overall, they're good cars to taken care of. Okay. Let's see here. So my screen jumped again. Now I have to go back and find it. I think, yes. Sorry, guys. I'm trying to go in order to keep things in order as much as possible. Where was I? So, okay, I think we were here. So JT says, 2008 Camry Hybrid, 53,000 miles. Does this year have a problem with oil consumption issue? Car manufactured in Kentucky? Yes. So the 2008 Camry Hybrid does have the 2AZ XE. I think that was the designation in the engine. Yes, they were affected by the oil consumption. If you have oil consumption at the moment, pistons and rings, or try an oil cleaner, make sure you keep that oil topped up. If you do not have issues, I would highly advise you, and this is one that I usually recommend oil changes every 5,000 miles, but on that one, if you're not going to plan to do those pistons and rings anytime in the future, I would keep your oil changes at 3,000 miles, and you should have no issues. So Candy Cane, and Candy Cane, I actually know her personally. She was the volunteer for the Prius Prime battery fan filter cleaner. So thank you, Candy Cane, for that. Let's read your question. Can I use my Prius Prime battery when camping this summer? Lights, cooler, or maybe powering fans? I think Priuses and camping are okay. You're you're not going to go camping for 6 months in a row. You're going to go camping here and there, and yes, it does put some stress on everything, but these cars are usually overbuilt, and in the case of the Prius Prime, they're definitely overbuilt. You know, I know. Actually, I know your car. It's a well-maintained car, taken care of. I don't think you have a problem camping in the summer, keeping your lights cooler and the powering fans. You should have no issues with that at all. I hope you enjoy your camping trip. Okay, let us see. So, Anita, I'm reading your response. Did you end up getting a RAV4 Prime? No, I did not get a RAV4 Prime. You guys got to know that it's very hard for me to buy a car because I just see it's very hard for me to buy a Toyota. Maybe that's why I own the disaster that I have sitting in front of me. Just looking at a Toyota when I buy one, it's like all I see is, oh, I remember taking that engine apart. I remember taking this disaster out. I remember when this thing flooded, and it just kind of locks me away from the car. And I tend to go look at in the case of a new car, it's a different story. But used cars, it's like all I see is problems. So I'm like, I don't want to deal with that. I'd rather buy a car that I know nothing about and deal with it when the storm starts. But no, I have not gotten the RAV4 Prime yet, and maybe in the future, we'll see. Line Cruiser is kind of going up in my list right now, the 100 series. So Victoria says, I have a 2017 Camry. I bought it last year, certified, Toyota certified. The brakes click loud every time I apply the brakes, but only on reverse. I took it in the dealership. They said it was normal. Help. So Victoria, I really dislike doing this, but that is normal. And please allow me to explain. I really dislike telling people their concern is a normal condition, but let me explain. The pads that sit in the front of the car, they have a little bit of movement. They're not like a tight fit. If they are tight fit, they no longer move, and they no longer can move freely to apply the brakes and then back out. They'll just be stuck. So the Camrys, they were known for this. You're not alone. There's many people that complain about this. When you put it in reverse and you first apply the brakes, the pad that has a little bit of movement, it will click up because as the car changes direction, your pad gets pulled the other way and it makes that single click. And if you actually pay attention and put it in drive and really close listen, as soon as you put it in drive, it'll make the same click, but the other way around. There's nothing to do about that. Yes, we can tighten the pins, put a little bit extra grease to try to muffle it down, but it'll still be there. And now that you've heard it, it's kind of hard to unhear it. So I wouldn't worry about it at all. It's annoying, I understand, but I wouldn't waste too much energy chasing after it because it's a normal condition, and some mechanics will take advantage of that. And like, oh yeah, let's put new brakes and spend all your money. And then guess what? It's back to the same thing. I wouldn't worry about it. I would just let it go. I know it's annoying, but I would just let it go, honestly. So, William Castillo, thank you, sir, for your super chat. Great stream. You're welcome to move to Florida, especially Miami. In that way, you don't have to deal with the rust, and I would have a great hey, man, I would love to move to Florida, okay? You know, there's I like the heat. And originally, one day I will reveal where I actually come from, my country of origin. I do come from hot climate. So when I moved here, it was a really good story of how when I moved here, how I freaked out from the cold weather. But now, of course, after years, I got used to it. But yeah, I would love to move to Florida. Just you get tied down to, and that's see, if anybody in this live stream lives in Chicago, you know how Chicago is. Everybody in Chicago enters the Great Depression around January, and right now we're just starting to come out of the Great Depression. In these 3 months until March, the end of March into April, everybody says, that's it, we're moving out of Chicago this year, I can't take this anymore. Then the summer hits, and it's such a beautiful summer, it's such a beautiful city that everybody forgets about the winter until that cycle repeats every single year. So kind of I'll blame this one on Chicago. It's such a beautiful city that's hard to move out of. So Cecile Martin says, do low rolling resistant tires offer a big advantage in fuel economy over regular tires? 2017 Prius here. So yes, low rolling resistant tires, they do make a difference in gas mileage, and most Prius models, and I'm almost sure yours is one of them, they from the factory they did come with low rolling resistant tires. However, low rolling resistant tires are not the greatest of everything. They do have one big drawback. They don't handle very well. They usually don't do well in rain, snow, overall handling. They don't do very well because they're focused on economy, not really handling and grip and all that other stuff. So you will have to make that decision. If you bought this car new and it had original tires and you're very happy with the way it drives, and you never saw in a situation where, wait, why is this car so not great in snow or rain or like higher highway speeds, just feels unstable, then I would stay with the same tires because those are low rolling resistance. But if you felt it unstable and not good in rain and snow, then perhaps switch to other, but just know you're going to sacrifice a small amount of fuel economy for that better handling. You know, just pick which preference you want in that case. So Akun says, on normal non-off-road driving, do you recommend changing the oil every 5K or 10K miles? My dealership has free lifetime oil changes every 10,000 miles. Honestly, personally, and even we're getting to a point where professionally I recommend this, I would replace the engine oil every 5,000 miles, especially if you're keeping the car. Now, you're keeping this car only for 3, 4, 5 years. Yeah, don't worry about it. But if you're keeping it that 10, 15 years, definitely change it every 5,000 miles. And don't even question that. Like, why am I doing it? Do it to protect your engine. So when the engine gets older, you're not going to have the problems that everybody else will have that didn't listen or didn't know. That's the worst one. The dealership that gives you free lifetime warranties, not free lifetime warranty, that's not a very good one, but the free lifetime oil changes every 10,000 miles. Great. Every 5,000 miles, you pay for the oil change, they pay for the next one, and keep it going like that. That's what I would do. The rest is up to you. So let's see. Next question. Oh, I almost said it like Grandpa. Kevin says, what is your opinion on 2016 Toyota Corolla Altis? So we don't have the 16 Altis, and they are very similar to our Corolla, but we don't have that exact model. So I will give you a broad opinion on 2016 Corolla. It is a nice car. It is a good car, but you got to take care of it. These things, some of the older Corollas, you could really neglect them and they're fine. But the newer ones, you really got to take care of them. With any car, you take care of it, it'll take care of you. And that goes across the board for all modern Toyotas. But if you're buying one used or you already own it, continue to take care of it. If you're buying one used, make sure it has good service history. It's never been neglected, no major accidents, or if there are major accidents, that they've been fixed correctly, and you should have no issues. So Robin says, main Toyota dealers don't clean the filter onto the rear passenger seat. What happens when you buy a car from a non-Toyota dealership? Yes, and this is, do you know why Toyota dealerships don't check the filters on, I'm assuming this is on a hybrid. Why they don't check the filters? I don't know. They don't want your business. They don't want you to take care of your car right. I don't know why they don't do that. It just doesn't make sense, because that is the lifeblood. And if there is any Toyota technicians, I don't know, they probably don't watch my live stream, but if there are any Toyota technicians out there who do not check hybrid filters, you're not doing your job. I'm sorry. That's just the bottom line. There should not be a single Toyota technician that have not run across a completely clogged and destroyed hybrid filter from a clogged fan, unless you don't work on hybrids. Other non-Toyota dealerships, I don't blame them, because They don't know. However, I'm hoping with my channel will bring awareness to this, so the next time you go buy a used hybrid, the previous owner knew about it and took care of it. So when you buy it used, you can keep it for 10 more years without any single issue. That's all we can do. So Darshan says, thank you, sir, for your super chat. 2010 RX 350 exhaust. The middle resonator keeps blowing at the seam. Not sure how to diagnose. So when you say blowing at the seam, I'm assuming the gasket is leaking, or oh, you mean, I'm trying to read into your comment here. So if the seam is breaking and you're welding it, unfortunately, welding a seam never have worked very well. You're gonna have to cut it, get a new resonator, weld it on, and it should be good. But if you're referring to a gasket, sometimes, and I'm assuming here you are from the great white north. I like that word. So if you are in a rusty environment and the gasket is not sealing well, there's a good chance that the flange have rotted away and no longer can keep a tight connection. That's a very common one, and it happens. That's not Toyota or Lexus. That's the road salt we use. So if that's the case, you're going to have to cut the flange, weld new flanges, and now you're good. Or I don't recommend it, but if you're on a budget, just go straight pipe between the flanges, and it won't be a great fix, but it'll fix your problem at that point. So let's see. So Emilio, I answered your transmission fluid, but drain and fill, I would get a drain and fill on that transmission, just letting you know, because I saw your comment a few times. Sorry, I didn't see that you added to it. I would do a drain and fill, and I would call it a day. I wouldn't do a flush in your case. So let's continue on. So Miro says, greetings from Croatia. What is your opinion about direct injection and carbon buildup in the intake? I decided for a city car to buy a new Yaris 1.5, 125 HP, not hybrid, because it has 2 injectors per cylinder. So that exact model we do not have, but direct injection, there is a small science to this. It's a matter, if you have direct injection only, not dual injection like the D4S, where you have a port injector and a direct at the same time. With those, it's a matter of time before you have some kind of buildup on the intake. Now, whether that buildup is going to be a problem or it's just going to be a buildup that stays there and looks ugly but doesn't really affect the operation of the valve, that time will tell. But is there going to be buildup on direct injection engines only? It always will be the case, because there's nothing passing over the valve. That's why the D4S system is such a great system, because it washes the back of the valve. Not all the time, but frequently enough as the engine is running, is switching back and forth, that you have the best of 2 worlds. Look, folks, direct injection is not a bad thing. It's a good thing, but with some disadvantages. So having both systems, you actually have the best of 2 worlds. And that's what in my opinion, what makes the D4S system really a cool design. So Caesar says, thank you for your super chat, sir. I have a 2011 Dodge Avenger, and when I go over a small bump, my car moves side to side. What can it be? Small disclaimer. I am a Toyota mechanic. I have no idea how a Dodge Avenger looks like, but cars are cars, so I'll try my best to give you my opinion. When the car moves side to side, so we're talking about a car that's driving straight, moving side to side, there are a few things that I would look at. Any kind of bushings, control bushings, things that would cause the body to shift. Now, another one with cars, and again, most of my information are Toyota, so I don't really have experience. A lot of people ask me about Hondas, Nissans, and Dodge, and other manufacturers. I can fix them, but I wouldn't be able to blindfold myself and fix them, because I don't work on them every single day. But car moving side to side typically is bushings. Sometimes it could even be tires or even an alignment issue. The suspension would need to be diagnosed first. Anything loose gets replaced. Loose tie rods. Again, with Toyotas, we don't really have loose tie rods as much and loose ball joints. I would have suspension checked. So if everything checks out perfect in the suspension, there's not a single worn item or loose item or bushings that are bad, then I would move to do an alignment and check the tires and go from there. That would be my first place to look. Sandeep, thank you so much for your super sticker, sir. Let's continue. So Michael Lee says, is it smart to trust these quick Jiffy Lube places to change the transmission fluid on a 2018 Avalon? Look, folks, there is a lot of Jiffy Lubes out there that are really hardworking folks. They work very hard. They care about their quality. But the key word here is some. And actually, that sum is a shrinking number. The problem with Jiffy Lube is if it's a corporation, but that's not the word I'm looking for. It's a franchise. So it's like McDonald's. It's good, but is it? But every once in a while, you're going to have that one Jiffy Lube that is privately owned, and the person that owns it actually knows what they're doing, and they really do good work. But we're talking about a needle in a haystack, unfortunately. To answer your question, I don't know if I would trust Jiffy Lube to change the engine oil, let alone a transmission, let alone a sealed transmission on a 2018 Avalon. I'd rather you just never change the fluid than if this is the only place that can do it in your area. Jiffy Lube, folks, be very careful. And I wonder how they sustain their business operation, because their prices are not exactly cheap. Most of in my area, at least, maybe it's different in other areas. Maybe that's what keeps them going. But in my area, their prices are exactly the same at the dealership. Oh, well, we clean your vacuum, whatever, and we do our full inspection. What inspection? What are your qualifications, sir? How do you inspect a car when you have no idea what you're looking at? You didn't even lift the car up. That's my question to Jiffy Lube when they do those quick inspections. We check this, check that, check that. Well, most of the stuff you can check on your own as a car owner. It's in your owner's manual. Why are you paying someone to do it? But long story short, I would never trust them with the transmission fluid. They will never have the right fluid, and they don't have the experience, all the tools, or the qualifications to do that. Please don't do that. Maybe with an oil change. Personally, I don't, but maybe with an oil change, maybe, but transmission, absolutely not. So, Peter in New York. I have a 2017 RAV4. Dealership says the transmission fluid never needs to be changed. Fluids last as long as the transmission. And they're not lying to you. I agree. I agree with their statement. However, how long is this transmission going to last is the question I would like to ask them. 100,000 miles? 120? 150? I wouldn't hold my breath to find out. See, the problem with the language on that transmission fluid is, oh, it's for the lifetime of the transmission, not the car. But how long is that lifetime? They do not say a little asterisk. Lifetime is defined as 50 years and 700,000 miles. They don't define that. For them, it's like, oh, the first owner will keep the car, not really have to spend much. 5 years pass, throw the keys at the dealership, pick a new car, move on. Then the second owner is stuck with a car with a bad trans. So some dealerships unfortunately go by this because they don't want to deal with it. I would find another dealership or find a trusted independent mechanic, have them buy the original fluid. The procedure is not difficult. There's a lot of good independent mechanics that will take care of your car, that have the know-how, have the tools. They can buy the original fluid if you insist. Again, you are the customer. You can ask them. You're the customer. It's your car. You can ask them what fluid to use. And it's not like you're bringing them some cheap fluid. You're bringing them the original fluid. Please use this in my car. It's original. I don't think a shop will have a problem with that. But I would definitely change that transmission fluid. So Philip says, should I change the default transmission oil transfer case on my Tacoma 2011 with 130,000 miles. So I'm trying to read your question here, and I'm either getting tired or I just went to the eye doctor and I do need glasses. Maybe I should listen to him and get him stop being so stubborn. But the transfer, if you're referring to the transfer case, yes, I would replace that fluid every 30,000 miles. If it's overdue, that's okay. Just replace it, and it's better replaced than overdue than never replaced. But if your transmission oil has never been replaced, I would be careful at this mile. I would take a sample, see how it looks. If it's very burned and dark, I would leave it alone. Unfortunately, at this point, you're at the point of no return. But if it looks clean, relatively clean, doesn't smell burned, I would drain and fill it and call it a day at that point. Okay. So, Soccer Dad, thank you, sir, for attending the chat, the live stream. So, Mike Larry, how can I pass the emission test with the check engine light on a 2004 Sienna code PO420? Unfortunately, sir, that van is outside of the window where you could do things, which we will not talk about because I will lose my license. But unfortunately, in this case, your catalytic converter is likely the suspect. I will have a video in this week, probably the second video of the week. We're talking about catalytic converters and why they fail and what's going on with them, how to diagnose them. But the main thing I will tell you here is, do you have exhaust leaks? If you have exhaust leaks, and specifically by the catalytic converter, they need to be fixed first before you replace that catalytic converter. However, on that Sienna, I wouldn't be, if that age, I wouldn't be surprised. And unfortunately, the only way you can pass emissions in that one is to get that catalytic converter replaced. Shop around, find an aftermarket one. Maybe they're cheaper. Won't last as much as the original, but it'll fix the car for now so you can pass your emissions. So, Shadow Supra says, is there any way to remove or bypass the hybrid EV sound in the new vehicles? It's annoying. Oh yeah, I agree with you. They're super annoying. However, I'm looking into this one, trying to find a easy way to disable it, because technically it's a safety device. They put that noise that was super loud. I think it would be nice if you can control how loud it is, because you really wake up all your neighbors when you back out of your driveway unnecessarily. I don't think an engine makes this much noise idling in reverse. But I'm looking into this one, and I'll probably make a video about it once I find a good way for it, because there's no easy way to disable them, because they're a safety device, so you really can't disable them in an easy way like with TechStream or something. So Ali says, what's the right temperature fluid for replacing 2020 Corolla CVT? Please comment on this video or email me at thecarcanada@gmail.com, because I have to look it up. I don't know all these. Every single car is different. I'd have to look it up for you. So CB says, I will be buying a 2021. Oh, I'm sorry. We responded to this question already. So Naveen the Machine says, I feel that the front air vents in my 2020 Camry are weak when I don't use the AC. When I use the AC at the lowest fan speed, I can feel the air coming to my face versus without AC. Could this be something wrong with the vents? No. So the thing about AC in some of these cars, when you put it on max AC, you're going to have recirculating air. By the way of the design of I think all cars, not just Toyotas, honestly, you will have more airflow when you have it on recirculate versus fresh air. So perhaps I would keep an eye on what is it doing when you put it AC on, because honestly, it should not have any effect, because all you do when you turn the AC on is just the compressor comes on and now the evaporator gets colder, and that's how the AC works. But it shouldn't have an effect on the fan speed unless it's changing it automatically when you turn the AC on to recirculate. I would look into that. See, do let me know what you find, and I'll look into it a little bit. But let me know if that recirculate comes on. So Devin says, will a bad tire throw off the steering calibration or Prius seat as in the center a few degrees off to the left? Yes and no. Let me explain. So if tires have a condition where it's called tire conicity, sorry, I'm trying to find the right word. I'm getting tired here. So tire conicity is when the tire is causing a force to pull the car. Now, you're driving your car, you said your pull is to the left. So if your car is pulling to the left, and my left might be different than the camera, I just realized that. Your car is pulling left, but the force is actually pulling the car right. So you're by your steering wheel being off center to the left, you're actually compensating that tire pull. That is one situation. The other situation is you hit a curb and there's a slight bend, which can be corrected with an alignment. That's not an issue. Don't listen to the word bend and think something is bad. But a slight bend will actually throw the alignment off a little bit, and now you're off center to one side. I would get the alignment checked. If the alignment checks out fine, or actually before the alignment, rotate the front tires left to right and drive it. If all of a sudden it pulls to the other side or the pull goes away, you have a tire problem, sir, and it's not an alignment issue. Otherwise, just an alignment and life's good. So, guys, we're reaching the end of the live stream. I will take 2 more questions randomly. I'm just going to scroll down and we'll go some of the back questions. Let's see here. Let's take this one. So Suraj says, I have a Toyota Corolla hybrid wagon. Can you say what maintenance should I change? The engine, transmission oil, what type of oil is recommended? So when you said wagon, that's usually the red flag for me. We don't have a Corolla wagon. We have a Corolla hatchback in the US. I do not want to give you incorrect information. The engine oil is going to depend on what year you have, what engine you have, because you're outside of the US, I am assuming, because of the wagon word. Do send me an email with more information on your car, what engine it has, what year, what everything, and I will get back to you on that one. Let's take one more question. So I have a 2004 Toyota Sequoia. I bought it secondhand. What is the recommended fuel filter change interval? So this is one that used to have a fuel filter, still external one. So wait, I'm trying to remember. Is the 04 Sequoia has a fuel filter? So don't quote me on this because my memory is not helping me today. I'm still getting forgetful. But if your Sequoia has a fuel filter, it would be on the driver's side by the, you know what? This car that they don't have a fuel filter. I'm trying to remember this. Line Cruisers did, but this one didn't. The only fuel filter that you have is in the fuel tank, and that is just the bottom of the fuel pump. It's really not a service item. I would not service it. I would not worry about it. You could cause more contamination just opening the fuel pump, the fuel tank, just to replace that little thing that really doesn't have it in trouble. If you had a physical fuel filter, some of the older Toyotas did. Land Cruiser is one of them. They had a physical fuel filter. You'll see it on the driver's side of, like, right under the fuse block, and in that area. Even some of the older Camrys, Avalons that have that. But if you don't have that and the fuel line goes straight from the rail all the way down, then you don't have a fuel filter, and I wouldn't worry about the one in the tank. It's not a serviceable item. So, folks, before we wrap up, I will take one last question. And the last is always first, so we're going to take the last question. Ashley Green, which would you recommend, a Lexus ES350 or a Toyota Avalon? Honestly, Ashley, in most of these, they're exactly the same car. The exact same thing. I mean, underneath the car, when I have an Avalon lifted and an ES350 lifted up, they're exactly the same car underneath. Same engine, same chassis, same everything. They do drive somewhat similar, where if you look at them driving wise, they do drive, they have the same feeling. The Lexus will have a little bit more insulation, it'll feel a little bit quieter, a little bit smoother, but not significantly more. But the way they drive, they drive exactly the same. So it comes down to, you're looking at two of the exact same car in kind of a different suit, if you would. The Lexus being more on the quieter side, more maybe better materials, maybe looks better. Although I think they're both really good cars, and you won't have a problem going with either of them. However, if you're shopping around and you're looking at one, I would focus more on which example are you looking at. Are you looking at one that is clean, good maintenance history, and kind of dual shop for both, or go drive both of them, see which one you like more. If you like one over the other, go for it. They're both really good cars. All right, guys, having answered the last question, thank you so much for attending the live stream, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Guys, I'm still trying to figure out what's the best time for the live stream. I'm trying to do it every couple weeks, but I know I've skipped a week because of my vacation, but I'll try to keep this every other week. Don't quote me on that until we make it official. So until the next live stream or the next video, guys, thank you so much for attending. I really appreciate it. May the Lord bless you and keep you, and you guys have a wonderful day.